Andrea, do you want to get started now, or do you want to wait a few more minutes for people to trickle in?
I think we can get started.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. Let's get started. So, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today with us. This is just going to be the road chapter talking about our experience doing an online recruitment process as well as online pledging. And hopefully you can take some of the things that we did this past quarter. And hopefully you don't have to use this stuff. Hopefully this is all for nothing. But in case you do have to conduct online recruitment, here's how we did it. And hopefully you can kind of take something from that. So what we're going to be covering today is hosting online recruitment and the marketing that goes into it, adjusting to online pledging and how that kind of works. And then we'll do a Q&A. This is meant to be very casual. We'll just kind of talk about our experiences. And if you have any questions pertaining to your chapter, we're happy to make it a conversation as much as we can with 93 people. And this is also being recorded right now. So if another chapter wants to see this, they'll be more than welcome to view this recording. Before we get started, my name is Jojo Saunders. I'm from the fall 2017 pledge class, and I'm the VP of membership, or I was the outgoing VP of membership. And joining me is Andrea.
Yeah, I'm Andrea. This was my I'm a graduated senior now, but so this was my last recruitment cycle, and I was the MOR last year.
So we can just get right into it. We'll basically talk about our experience. We essentially got the call from our school that spring quarter was going to be online the day after finals, which gave us about a week to kind of figure out what exactly were we going to be doing. Andrea and I started talking just kind of quickly about we saw the progression of how fast COVID-19 was spreading. We started talking to our membership team about, there might be a chance that we don't have the ability to host a recruitment in spring. But then when we realized that we were losing about 40% of our graduating class, which was our chapter, we realized we at least needed to try. Our biggest thing that we realized that would be the roadblock is mingling and networking. We'll talk a little bit more about how we actually handle our recruitment process and how that was being affected. And this was kind of the main roadblock. If we didn't have the ability to do mingling, we couldn't really do recruitment altogether. So once we figured out the plan, essentially what we did was we drafted up a full document that covered how we would do online recruitment. We went through like an FAQ with members in case they were confused on how things worked. And the main reason we did that was we wanted to provide our members with the full new mental model of how Rush was going to be or how recruitment was going to be. We realized that for some people, they would be just so used to what we have originally done in person that hearing that online recruitment was going to happen, people would be like, I don't know how that would work. And then because of that, they wouldn't believe in it. So we just put all of the resources out immediately for our chapter to know. And then that switched a little bit into marketing. And for marketing, what we usually do is we do a profile photo overlay, Facebook banner overlay, and it always has a little blurb about AK size recruiting right now. We did an Instagram countdown in a Q&A, and I can actually show what that looks like. So usually we don't do this, but one thing that we had to do is all of our recruitment stuff was going to be through social media. We really had to heavily rely on it. So we started using our Instagram. We started doing a countdown. One thing that we did that was really helpful that our VP of marketing did was ask this question, gave people the ability to ask questions. And we essentially, no one would really put in questions. We just fed questions to it just so that we could help kind of cover those bases that people might be a little bit concerned about. So this was something that was super helpful for us. But the thing that we usually do that we didn't do this time was a Rush video just to have a little bit of extra marketing material. We created a recruitment guide. And essentially what the recruitment guide was telling them how online recruitment was going to work. Because we were putting a lot of feelers out for, we had our friends ask, hey, do any of your friends want to Rush or come out to AK size recruitment? And a lot of the things was people didn't really know how that was going to work. So we realized we needed to create a document like this that kind of covered how online recruitment was actually going to work. And this helped kind of ease the anxiety or the confusion that people might have when it comes to actually creating a like online recruitment process and how to navigate it. So we found out that this was actually a very helpful resource. And we'll be happy to kind of turn this into an AKSI resource so that all of you have it, just so that you can kind of figure out and calm the nerves of potential members.
Yeah, so like Jojo said, that guide ended up being really helpful just because like I think our biggest concern wasn't so much of members figuring out how to do it. It was going to be the rushies figuring out how this works. And so we tried to make it like as clear cut as possible. And like how our usual recruitment cycle goes is that we usually do it in the first week of the quarter so that way people are free and can come out to the events. We do our info night, alumni night, and those are pretty fixed. Like that's just us presenting. And then we always do a meet and greet where we cycle people through the room. It's kind of like speed dating. And then we do an invite only night, which is a pitch competition, so that we get the chance to see how they work in teams. And then we do a second invite for our interviews. So if you see like how intensive our first one was, our online adjustment made it much more condensed. So we ended up switching it to the third week of the quarter to give rushies our new members kind of figure out how Zoom worked, get adjusted to being at home. I think for us, we felt like it was to ask people to like navigate school online, getting used to being at home, and also do rush. And so we switched it to the third week of the quarter. The only thing we changed was really the facilitated meet and greet and making it open. Jojo will go into kind of how we did like an open meet and greet. Basically, we just couldn't feed like speed dating questions anymore. And we couldn't really control like how long people were going to be talking. We kind of recommended that you limit your conversations so that way you can meet more people. But obviously it was kind of at the discretion of the members. And then the other thing we did was passion pitches. Our chapter usually goes between passion pitches and pitch competition, but with the passion pitch, we had each person that was invited back come up with a 1 to 2 minute speech about something that they're really passionate about. We've had people talk about fitness. We've had people talk about animal cruelty. It goes all over the place, which is really cool because it gives us more insight to who they are as a person versus like, you know, the usual, I am a freshman studying business. It's just nice to give them a chance to kind of tell us more about who they are. And we knew that it meant that it could be that they're reading off a screen. I think this really just gave us the chance to get to know them. With the pitch competition, we see how they work in a group, but we didn't want to do that this time because it would be kind of hard to do over Zoom. And then we had our interviews and induction. Jojo, do you want to talk about the next slide?
Yeah. And then just to kind of piggyback off of that, how the standard format was, we have a check-in period, the main event, which is one of the main things like info night or alumni night, and then we went into mingling. So when it came into checking in, one of the things that we realized is that like when it comes to checking in person, usually they're waiting in a line, they fill out a Google form, we take a photo of them so that we kind of like can have a face to the applicant. We realized we had to have the potential new members do that on their own. So that was something that we had to kind of set up for them. And then one thing that we were very concerned about was security. Like we were very worried that someone was going to Zoom bomb us or someone was just going to go off the rails. So what we did as a like safety feature was that we put all of the links on a Google Doc, and that Google Doc could only be accessible if you were viewing it through your university's email account. So like you had to use a University of Washington email account to view all the links so that we at least knew that those individuals would be UW students. And that would give them the main event Zoom link, the member directory, and the feedback form if like they have any points of feedback when it comes to online recruitment.
We also had it so that during the main event that they were only messaging me if they had questions, so that way it was a little more facilitated and not kind of like a free-for-all. It was also just like an easier way to like be respectful of their time, because we were getting like 3 of the same questions again. It's like, when will I hear back? And so that was another way for us to just make sure like nothing crazy was going on in the chat as well.
Yeah. So here are the main events we did. Andrea kind of briefly talked about them. So this is kind of like the brunt of how we handled just our standard recruitment process. These are the same events that we always provide. The main thing was mingling or networking, if that's what you call it. And this is by far the thing that we had to figure out just completely. If we didn't know how to do this, we frankly couldn't hold it. So how mingling usually works is that everybody's in the same room. If you want to talk, if you want to get to know someone, you walk up to them, you talk to them, you have a good conversation, you move on to the next person. Given CDC guidelines, that's not okay. So how we switched it was that every member was in their own Zoom call. And what we had was we had every member's individual Zoom link and we put it in a member directory. And this was kind of like the room that you would be in. And this had everybody's name, their year, their major. And if you wanted to walk up to someone and talk to them, essentially you just clicked on their Zoom link and then you were talking to a brother. And this was our way of kind of facilitating that, because then it was as natural as it could be on Zoom. And once we figured this out, we realized everything else was very natural around it. So members would also use a color coding system. So we had blue, green, yellow, and red to indicate if they're available. So if you realize that, oh, this brother is blue, that meant that they had no one in their room, so you feel free to join them. Some brothers like having more than one person in their Zoom call. That was completely up to them. We would have them turn on their waiting room so that they could kind of manage how many people they wanted at a time. And it could kind of incentivize other people to kind of move on to other people if they had like a long wait time. So this is what we had after every single event. When it came to the open meet and greet, essentially we just took 2 brothers and we put them in a room together, and then we had the same directory, and it was basically just that the entire time. And we found that to be very successful.
To add on to that, we also found that like mingling is usually like what happens at like the end of every event. Like there's usually like 30 to like 45 minutes of like mingling. Huge part of like members getting to know the people coming through. The other thing we did was that we started pairing members to be in their own link call together, because it sucks to like talk to someone alone sometimes, or like have to like facilitate it. So that was fun, because it's like members were able to like talk to each other, catch up, be like, what did you think of this person? And kind of get like group conversations going. We found that that really helped with morale, because as you know, recruitment's already like strenuous enough.
I think one thing to also add is that the reason why we have a huge focus on making sure that mingling and networking works is because when it comes to making, for at least our chapter, when we come to making the decision of who moves forward, it's very focused on the feedback that we get from our members. So if you have a chapter that when you do recruitment, your membership team essentially handles all of that, this might not be super pertainable to you, but if you rely heavily on member feedback, this is where like setting up and orchestrating how to do online mingling is like very helpful. So when it came for recruitment results, we usually get about 150 to 200 people to come out to our first few events. And it levels out about 100 people. We usually get maybe 100 to 120 applicants. For this, we got over 100 people to come, which was very relieving for us. We averaged about 80 people per event, and I think we had about 85 applicants. And we'll do a little disclaimer at the end, but like, obviously if like we are a much larger chapter, we have about 100 brothers. And like are decently established at our business school. So if like your numbers are different, you might need to adjust kind of how these things were. One thing that we were a little bit worried about for contingency was if say like 20 people came, we were worried that that number wasn't reflective of the candidate pool. So we had like a fail-safe number where we were like, if only this amount of people came, we would just defer them to fall and just use this as a time to kind of talk about AKSI. So luckily we didn't have that, and then we kind of moved on. That kind of brings us into pledging. Andrew, you're muted.
Yeah, our usual pledging cycle is 7 weeks, because we usually want to be respectful of like dead week, and so we try not to make it longer, just because we want people to have time to study and like make sure our business school does finals very early. And so that was the rationale behind the 7-week program. And as you can see, our pledges we usually had a lot of pledges kind of come through, and that explains why we face like a huge deficit with this graduating class. And because they were able to do more events in person, such as fundraising and philanthropy, we kind of minimized the industry interview requirement just because it's a lot. It's easy to do casual interviews with brothers when it's in person because we're all in the same place. But if you, Jojo, can you click through to the next one? And our online adjustment, we made it 5 weeks since we were starting later in the game. We didn't want to push it too far into the end of the quarter as well. We originally were like, we're only going to take 12 because we wanted to make sure it still felt like a meaningful experience. We had 4 pledge mentors, so they would each get like 3 pledges that they could talk to and like really mentor through the process. We had really good applicants, so it was really hard for us to narrow down further. So we ended up taking 16. We don't usually set a hard number for ourselves just because we want to be fair to like the applicant pool. And the membership team is very involved in us making those calls on who gets pushed through. Member interviews were still a thing. I can't remember how many we had them do.
I want to say it was 20. I think it was 20.
Yeah.
It was whatever the maximum was for when you're filling out your Bridge to Brotherhood syllabus, the maximum for a given week. That's what we allowed them to do. We were worried that if it was too overwhelming, we would just lower the number for them. But that one seemed fine.
And to the questions in the chat, we can get to these at the end, just because, they're going to be all over the place. The industry interviews are actually where we realized that we should be incorporating our alumni a lot more, just because our alumni, like recent alumni, are pretty involved and they're pretty willing to be involved. So we recommended to them that, you don't just have to like cold message these people on LinkedIn. You can also just like reach out to alumni who are too far out. So that ended up being really helpful because a lot of alumni were able to like reach out to current members and be like, wow, what do you think of this person? I just talked to them, which is really cool. It's hard for us to engage with alumni sometimes. So this definitely helped with that. And then we cut down on the philanthropy and fundraising events just because, we knew it was a hard time financially. And also it's just a lot to do right now. Philanthropy is difficult to do virtually, just with the times. And so we kind of had the focus go to PD and Brotherhood events, which was cool because they really they took their initiative to figure out what they could do online. It was we asked them in their application how they could see themselves facilitating Brotherhood online. So they already kind of had that seed like planted in their mind on what they could do. And then we maintained the personal brand project, which they presented to the whole chapter.
One thing specifically that was a logistical hurdle at first, and I think a lot of chapters will end up dealing with this, is that so we didn't prevent anybody in a different time zone from applying, going through the recruitment cycle. But one thing we specifically told them in the application and made them agree to was that just for the sake of the members and for the sake of the incoming pledge class, we were going to operate within Pacific Standard Time. So we said from like 9 a.m. to like 8 p.m., like there could be an event. You might want to have an interview there. You might have the pledge meeting there. Well, they knew when the pledge meetings were. It was always on Tuesdays from 6:30 to 8. But it was like, it is your prerogative to be able to do this if you're in a different time zone. For the most part, everybody was in Pacific Standard Time, except we had one person from Indonesia, which I believe it was a 7-hour time difference. And that was something that we were like, let us know how we can help you. But she managed it fairly easily on her own. At first, we were considering just having it be Pacific Standard Time only. But we did hear from a lot of people that people were actually adjusting their sleep cycles to fit with UW because we still had some synchronous classes, which meant that people in different time zones unfortunately had to be up at that time. So they kind of just adjusted. So we realized if they wanted to go through that, that was like all the power to them.
And we actually found that by making that available to people, some people were not able to rush before because of conflicts with time. So this actually became a really accessible option for people who would not have been able to rush before. So it was like an unexpected benefit.
Absolutely.
Jojo, do you want to go to the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so our big kind of changes to pledging were just increased alumni involvement. We had some people come back for our PD events that we hosted as a membership team. We had them go through resumes and cover letters, which was really, really great. I think it kind of eliminated that like intimidation that you have reaching out to alumni. We wanted to like make it clear that these are people you can talk to all the time, and not just like, you know, not just when you're graduating or not just when they come in for an event. We brought the chapter in to help with pledging, which was like that was just I will be honest, it was kind of annoying to like have to facilitate this every week, because it was
very much so
getting 16 Zoom links ready to go, and like, you know, everyone's like, what do I do if they can't access the practice quiz? Like, what do I do if I can't see their screen? It was like, it brought people together every Tuesday. And so we had them help like moderate practice quizzes. We had them help with personal help on resumes, which was really cool. It just made it easier for members to kind of like feel comfortable with the new pledges. And then the other thing we did was that we moved Big Little Reveal to the end of pledging. And this was a call that we made with people who were big candidates. We were like, what do you think is more feasible for you? And what like would you feel more comfortable doing? And just because we wanted to give them time to like get to know the pledges and have like a second meetup with them if they wanted to just kind of reaffirm their top 5 picks or whatever. I also wanted to note that everything took less time than it usually does in person. So you don't have, you'll probably pilot this, but we didn't need to have like an hour-long meeting sometimes for the membership team. Like now our meetings were like 20 minutes because there wasn't like any fluff or anything that we had to deal with, like rearranging rooms and whatnot. It also meant that like when the pledges did their fraternal exam, it was so fast. Like it was like super fast. I don't think they were cheating either. Like I'll be honest, I don't think they were. But I think it's just like a lot of these things were way faster, and it was nice because we could be way more respectful of time. It gets easy to drag things out in person. So it was nice for us to be like, no, this actually won't take as long as we thought, and so we can let you guys off early.
That also kind of tied into recruitment as well. Usually, like we would always have our members come 30 minutes before so that everybody was ready to go once the doors opened. As the week went on, we were able to have them come in much later, just because we didn't necessarily need them to be in there in person. You could just go up, turn on your camera, and you're ready to go. So yeah, overall, I think it streamlined everything for the most part. And kind of like Andrea said, we just had them do practice quizzes for the fraternal exam. That's something that we usually have our pledges do. And we had them moderate it. So instead of them joining my Zoom call for the pledge meeting, they would actually just join another person's Zoom call, which was a brother, usually a big candidate or someone on the leadership team. We just had them share their screen and then they would go through it on their own. Just as a way to kind of show that we care, that we're taking this seriously, like it's not something that you can just kind of cheat on. One thing that we did notice, which was a little difficult, was that we did notice that there was kind of a decline in fraternal knowledge. And I think it's one thing to be able to write out the 10 founders' names. It's another thing to either type them out or check them on a box, which we tried to focus them a little bit more on, kind of relating it back to like when you're interviewing for a job, you research the company, like you should have these things understood. But besides that, but one other thing is when it came to initiation, right after Court of Honor, we just kind of said, hey, congratulations. We didn't necessarily have an initiation ceremony per se. What we were going to do, and the goal is currently the first chapter of next quarter, we'll get to do their in-person initiation, just so they have something kind of a grandiose in-person thing to be like, congratulations, you did it. Originally, we were going to have that also be with the big little reveal, but we kind of just let the bigs kind of decide whether or not they wanted to do reveal on Zoom or if they wanted to do reveal at a later date. Here are 16 wonderful newly initiated brothers. They always sent us a photo of them right after their event that they did, which was a great morale boost for the chapter to kind of see them progressing. And it was cute. You could kind of see them get much more, it felt much more like a family near the end of the photos that they were sending, which I thought was really cool. But in summary, the main issues for recruitment was figuring out how members were able to interact with potential new members. And that was done through the member directory as well as those individual Zoom calls. The main issues for pledging was how can we ensure they develop brotherhood as well as develop professionally. And that's why we had them focus predominantly on the brotherhood events, the professional development events. And then overall, it helped us realize we can incorporate our alumni a lot more. And I think we're going to be incorporating that in the future. We don't necessarily know what UW's plans are for the fall, but what we're probably assuming with our next membership team is that they will be, it'll probably be recruitment will be online. And then if we have a small enough pledge class, we might be able to facilitate that in person, giving people the option to still do, to call in via Zoom if they don't feel comfortable with that. We're kind of figuring that out right now, so we don't necessarily know. But yeah, that's kind of how our chapter did it. Now it's just time for Q&A. If you guys have any questions, we can have this be a very open discussion. We have some questions in the chat and we can work through those first.
Yeah. Do you want to start with the largest event?
Yeah. Usually our largest event is the info night. And that's kind of just the same with everything. It's usually either the info night or the alumni night, just because it's the first two open events. And one thing specifically we do is the first three events are open. You have to attend two to be eligible to go to an invite only event. So it's usually our info night just because people are like, I have nothing else to do. I can go see what what this is like. And I think that one we got about 120 people to come.
I guess like the other thing is about the voting process, and I guess like the security of voting online. Our chapter still did like deliberation, and so what's the website we use to
Direct
vote on? Yeah, so we use direct poll. So we'll have like a slide with with the potential new member and the information about them. There will be a little bit of discussion, and then after that we'll open up the direct poll link for them to vote. And so that's all available. Like it's really simple actually for us to drop the link in there, and that's typically what we do in person as well, is that we have a discussion and then the link will open and you can vote. And at the very end, the membership team will take a look at all the numbers and see if we need to have any revotes. And so that's typically how we do it. And Jojo, do you want to talk about the member interviews?
Yeah, I got one private question before that. Did members change their colors on the Google Doc or on Zoom change their status? So how we had it was that on the member directory, members had edit access, where people that were just potential new members, they got view only access. So they could be able to change it. So if I had maybe 5 people on my Zoom call and that was too much for me, I didn't want anybody else coming in, I would highlight my name and then change it to red saying, hey, I don't have anybody, I can't take any more people right now. One thing we did realize is that when you have a view only copy, you have to refresh to see changes. So that was one of the hiccups we had on the first night, because people were changing their names, but they were still getting a bunch of people flooding in. So that's why we had them access the waiting room. We kept telling them to refresh the page just so they could see what was going on. And then member interviews, everything was through Zoom. So if someone wanted to have a member interview, it'd usually be they would send an email as well as like their Zoom link. And it'd be like a one-on-one interview. There wasn't anything that was done in person this year.
The personal brand project is really just a quick presentation on their end. They get one slide or two slides, I think. Right, Jojo?
It's one slide.
One slide to kind of just tell us, they kind of just tell us about themselves. Some of them were kind of similar to their passion pitches in some ways because they chose to, focus on something that they were really interested in. But it was also just helpful for people to for them to practice their communication skills, really is what it was for, and presenting concisely.
I got,
And
did any issues arise with parents? We didn't. Nothing, yeah.
We did not do fundraising events, David, because of the times we're in. We just felt like it wasn't appropriate to ask them to fundraise with financial constraints. And also, we felt that it was more beneficial to kind of just focus on brotherhood and PD for them. Jojo, do you want to, looking back, what is one part of,
one part of virtual recruitment that chapter could have improved upon? I don't really think there was any, we were frankly very happy with how it went. We also got feedback from people going through the process and they thought it went really well. It was very smooth. I think the one thing, if anything, this was a hiccup that we had. So we have an AKSI email, and we originally were using that. The problem is that once you go, I think our Zoom account specifically, you could only have 100 people on it. So 2 minutes before the actual event started, I had to shut down the Zoom call and then try it again on my own Zoom. So if you have an education account for your school's your school's email, use that, because then you usually have a cap of about 300. If you have 300 people coming to your recruitment event, congratulations, that's amazing. But yeah, that was one hiccup that we had. But besides that, I think everything flowed pretty smoothly.
Yeah, and I think we addressed the other hiccup with waiting rooms. We didn't have them set up in the beginning, but then once we did, people could facilitate better, and not have to kick out people from the calls, because getting 5 people versus 1 was not, that was not what was supposed to happen. But how did we pair bigs and littles without in-person speed dating? That's why we really encourage the member interviews. People know who the big candidates are, and it's typically prioritized for them to do interviews with them first. That's their own prerogative, but that's what we recommend. So it actually worked out well, because by the time we asked them to do their preferences, everyone had met with almost all the candidates at that point. So they had an idea of who everyone was, who their best fit would be. They had the chance to do a follow-up if they wanted to. And then we push the preferences to later. So that way we really ensure that there's ample time for people to be sure. And it ended up working out well, because we found that the pledges kind of self-organized, and they were here's who I want. And then people could adjust, which I don't know. I wouldn't personally knowing who everyone else wanted, but they figured that out on their own. And so it ended up making pairings really easy.
I had asked them, and I was we asked, because usually when you get to have an interview with someone, you're oh, who do you want as a big? And I remember when we went through pledging, we wouldn't tell anybody because we were scared that someone else wanted it. They just said that there was only so much you could talk about on a Zoom call together when you're doing it, that eventually they were just okay, we're just going through this, who wants who, and then it made it one of the easiest big little pairings to set up. And I think it was fairly successful.
Yep.
Let's see.
How are we able to do big little reveal at the end, Jojo?
We didn't necessarily, when it came to this, and essentially what we did was, when we told our regional director, Wendy, which she's here, hi Wendy, we were kind of just walking in new territory. We knew we had to cover the modules, and we had them set up through how we do our pledging program. When it came to big little reveal, there was just, how Row Chapter does is that's something that's a very sentimental bond with those two people. So we didn't want to necessarily just force it immediately. So we just pushed that off to the end. And then during it, we have our pledge mentors act as kind of pseudo bigs. Those are the people that you can text, you can call if you need to, get questions. and things like that.
Um,
I can go quickly for the recruitment guide question. I can actually just show it right now. So this is what it looked like. It was just a huge PDF, covered what checking into Rush would be like, joining the event. If you had a question, you'd private message Andrea, how mingling would work, and then the same analogy that I used with all of you. Once you're done, repeat, and then some tips on online recruitment, keeping it professional. If you had two people in the same apartment that were going to recruit together, they had to do it separately. Background images, keep it professional, obviously. One thing you do have to be very cognizant of is that a lot of individuals might, like we had a lot of people just basically leave UW immediately once this all got really bad. So a lot of people didn't have business professional clothing. They didn't have access to it. So that was something that we were very understanding of, where we were like, ideally for all the events, you can dress smart casual. For invite-only events, we'll just say business professional. And if you don't, just please let us know. And that will not affect any decision-making process whatsoever. Other tips, be patient, just because we always had someone from the membership team ready to troubleshoot if someone had any issues like technologically. And the last thing was just having fun. So this was very helpful. And we can send this out too. But yeah.
So the next question is about virtual interviews. And so with Rush interviews, so we always do the same thing where people have to sign up for a time. So they usually get that email, like, I don't know, whenever we decide the night before, which could be like 1 a.m. And then we kind of let them know, like, okay, you've made it, pick a time. And then we have, it's usually like a group interview. There's about 3 of them that will be in the same call. And then we have our own leadership team. Usually the leadership team will be the one asking questions. Nothing really changed about it. The timeline was the same. They got, 3 people would get 20 to 25 minutes in a group interview setting. And members could write their feedback on how they thought the interviews went. They could take their own notes. I think it was just really, I don't think much changed about it, honestly, other than the fact that, we were like, please don't dock these people if it looks like they're looking at another screen. Maybe they have a dual monitor, or, being very clear that like what we were looking for was not that, that they were, wearing the best outfit they could. Like we wanted to be typical professionalism things. Some of them just didn't apply in this situation. And so we really wanted the focus to be like, what are they saying? Like, how are they carrying through on like their resume experience? We had very intentional questions based on like their resumes. Everyone had a specific resume question that that someone on the leadership team would ask them about. And so we were a little more intentional on those questions. So that way we could really get a grasp on like, who are they? And, what have they done? Jojo, is there anything else?
Yeah, honestly, I think a big thing that we realized, as weird as it is, like a lot of what we usually do, we were able to do. It was just that we weren't together. We were just on a Zoom call. So interviews basically went the same. And it's still, I would definitely still say it's intimidating just to be on like a Zoom call, just like it would be for a job. So it wasn't like things felt a little bit easier. I think one thing I kind of noticed is that regardless of the challenges or tasks you have people do, it'll fill up all the time that they have. And I think that in and of itself gives them the ability to kind of push hard. So we have a couple questions on fees as well as Zoom accounts. So we had them just pay through our Venmo account. Our chapter has a Venmo account that we pay for dues, and that's sent off to the Heritage Center. They still paid the same fees that all of you would when you went through pledging, which I believe is the $48 fee and then the $84 initiation fee, because they still get the same resources regardless. And then every student at UW, this is for the question, do all of your members have paid Zoom accounts? Yes, they do. UW has provided all of us with an educational account. So when it comes to, if your school doesn't do that, you might need to find another workaround. or you can just reset the call. That can be something that people get used to, where it's like, oh, 40 minutes up, okay, we can jump right back on. But yeah.
The other question is, can you talk about how well the Brotherhood received this new structure? How did you ensure Brotherhood engagement for recruitment? That was like, I think this is going to change across any chapter. Like we have a lot of people, so it's kind of hard to get a consensus sometimes, but that's why it was really important for like me and Jojo to be super clear on what this process looked like before we communicated it with the chapter. And so, you know, making it clear that this was really all it would take is them making a Zoom link, and that that was mingling. We didn't even make them stay to listen to the events if they didn't want to, which usually is the case. So really the time commitment for them went down by a lot, and that they could do like the fun part, which is just mingling, which was really helpful. Our chapter is very social, so they love like getting the chance to meet new people, and that part stayed consistent with this. They like that it was like all online, because we were able to get feedback forms filled out way faster, because you can just type it out right after you chat with someone. So we ended up getting like the most feedback we've ever gotten, which is super helpful for us, like narrowing down people when we do our deliberation, because now it's like way more people met so-and-so, you know, and they actually wrote about it and told us, versus it being like 8 p.m. after a rush event and they just want to go home. Now it just made it faster. So in some ways, I think it's good to sell the fact that this process takes a little less time. And I think, you know, my big thing is being respectful of members' time. Like I hate like a lack of efficiency, and this is super efficient. So like this was definitely a selling point of doing it virtually.
Absolutely. So out of curiosity, what did the Pledges Brotherhood events look like? They were very creative. I was very impressed with them. They did I think their first one was that they did like the spicy noodle challenge together. I think all of them were really into EDM, so they did a little like, they all like watched like a set together. And then they just like played games together. Like it was like friends just hanging out on a Zoom call. I believe that heart photo that they had here, I think they were just doing like trying to figure out all the different ways they could do. I think like a meme had come out of like different ways to like do a heart, or like I forget what it was, but that was from it. So they were very creative with it, and I think that's also because we had them like, that was something we specifically asked about, was like, how have you like what's it called? How have you fostered community in an online setting? And we kind of push them to do that. So we let them be very creative as well, just kind of like focused on like, yeah, it might have not been the most professional thing, but they also have professional development events for that. Everything around it is professional. We don't want to have them become best friends in a suit and tie. Like it's a very casual thing, because like we might be a professional development organization, but you have to be friends with everybody beforehand for it to really work.
Yeah, and I think so with fall recruitment, like Jojo touched on it a bit in the beginning, but given like UW has not said anything about how they intend to do fall quarter, it sounds like it's going to be a hybrid in general, where large classes will not be taking place, which means for us, recruitment cannot happen in person, because that is just way too many people in one room. And so really like, ideally we could potentially do like pledge meetings in person, like that would be a dream. But really, I actually think that virtual recruitment is way more accessible. And I think that it's something that our chapter is taking into consideration to do, just because, you know, it means that more people can be there and get a chance to like see what AKSI is, and like what, you know, recruitment might look like, and whether or not it's for them. But it's definitely changed some of our outlook on how we do recruitment. I think you want to talk about it.
Yeah. I do know from UW that essentially any class over 30 is going to be online. The goal is to have hopefully TA sections, like lab sections, in person, just because then those are smaller groups, and you can leverage larger class sizes for that. So we've been talking with the VP of membership and MOR for the upcoming year, and I think it's probably going to be hybrid. We'll still probably give them the ability to do it remotely. I think that's one challenge that we're going to have to figure out, because we might have the opportunity to do it in person. I think for the most part, it'll be online. And then what if it comes to pledging? Maybe we can have people call in if they feel uncomfortable with it, because people might still not come back. So it's still kind of up in the air. What is your advice for other chapters who are apprehensive about doing a virtual recruitment and pledging program? Yeah, this was something that we were super worried about. Or at least I was super worried about it. I was freaking out the entire time because I had made a mistake where I had told our VP of marketing that we were going to do online recruitment once we figured everything out before we told the chapter. And this is where we realized telling everybody the entire plan at once is super helpful, because immediately some people were like, hey, I don't know how this is going to work. And their mental model of what recruitment was like was not cohesive with being online. So then essentially what we did was we put out that whole document saying, hey, this is what we have to do. And I think one thing that we kind of realized is that like us not opening our doors for people that want to join something and be a part of like AK Sci would hurt us, because if we're not doing it, then another organization that is deciding to do recruitment, they might take those individuals, and then we don't have the ability to grow with them. And like, honestly, like this is unfortunately how we just have to keep moving forward. Like we might've been able to get away with spring quarter not having a recruitment cycle, but this will continue to hurt our chapter's numbers as well as the people inside the chapter. So we always not argued, but kind of said like, this is something for new people to join our organization, as well as something for you all to do, to be able to get to talk to new people. And I think for the most part, people were receptive to that. One thing we did do is open up office hours and have people ask questions so that we could help facilitate that kind of conversation with them. But we provided all the details up front on this is how it's going to work. There is only so much you can do, frankly. But we also have the requirements of like holding recruitments, so we can grow as an organization. So for the most part, everybody was very receptive to it. I think just you might have to facilitate a few questions every now and then about it. It was also optional because we have a lot of people that are in different time zones. We were like, you don't have to come if you don't want to. Like, if you want to, that's great. But we totally get that. Like, we don't want you to wake up at 3 a.m. so that you can go to a rush event.
Yeah. I think like the other thing is that like we wanted to provide a sense of normalcy, so this was like a good way to do it. Like obviously like people were apprehensive about it before because it felt like kind of inauthentic to do it online, but I think it was really important for us for numbers, and saying that this puts way more stress on the committees to not, if we don't recruit more people, and we did not want our members to burn out. And so that was that. There are a couple of questions about the international aspect of AK Sci as a fraternity and also international students. I mean, honestly, we didn't actually spend a lot of time marketing AK Sci as an international fraternity. A lot of people actually do a lot of research on like AK Sci Row chapter and AK Sci in general. So they some people like drop facts about us like during mingling and stuff, which is cool because people are doing their research. And then we had one international pledge, and I don't think that there was actually a huge decrease in international turnout, just because a lot of UW students were having to adjust their time schedule to match up with UW classes, which is really frustrating that people had to like be up at like insane hours to like just listen to their class. So we actually found that people were still willing to come out. I don't think it was like a huge drop. I think it was pretty equivalent to what we usually get. We find that people who come out have been hearing about us for a while and been meaning to. So if anything, Zoom made it a little bit easier.
Yeah. And then when it came to marketing, like how we specifically marketed towards kind of the main message that we were always kind of like focusing on is like our tagline was that brotherhood doesn't have a distance. So regardless if you were across the world or you were an apartment over, this was a way to have a new community join you and a new community kind of support you during a very difficult time. I believe Seattle University is another chapter that did that. And their tagline was really cool. it was like, this is the new way of doing everything. So like when you get a job interview, it's probably going to be online now. When like you're networking with individuals, like the whole draw of being at home, like working from home, like we have to kind of jump on that new train and kind of be the trailblazers for it. And I think that's another way to kind of market it to your chapter as well, of being like, you should be the first one to do it. Because like, frankly, it got us a lot of really positive press with UW. Because we were frankly the only like organization to continue doing things, especially recruitment online. And I know that like how our business school runs operations for like their events, they're taking on how we did our mingling portion. And that's just positive press. We always love that. But I think it's also just as leaders in AKSI, we should kind of take those opportunities. And like, if we fail, it's okay to fail. Like we were completely ready to fail. Frankly, I had a feeling that every brother that joined the first Zoom call was like, this is the death of this chapter. Like we were going to have like 10 people show up and it's going to be super embarrassing. But one thing you just have to do is just like tell your members, like, you have to be in this 100%. Because if a potential new member jumps on and they can see it's a little finicky and the members don't really care, they're not going to want to continue. So you just have to kind of send it 100%. And the best thing, like, next thing you know, you have an online pledge class, or maybe it didn't work, and that's just a growing experience.
Yeah. Another question is about, wait, what?
Oh,
do
go
you
ahead.
Want me to do this?
No, yeah.
And so the other question is, if we weren't about to lose 40% of our brothers due to graduation, if it was like less than 10%, would you have still done a virtual rush? Probably. I think that like Jojo didn't want to do it in the beginning, if we're being honest, and I had to be the one who was like, where I think this is still a good call. I think that like we still would have done it just to try it. I think a lot of us were kind of like, what's the harm? Like if we get less people, we can defer them to fall, and then we wasted like maybe 10 hours planning how mingling would work. But it was definitely something that I think our leadership team was kind of like, yeah, why not? Like we should just try this. Everyone kind of still knew. We had everyone ask their friends, and like their friends were like, yeah, like I'd still probably try it if it was over Zoom. And other people were like, no, I want to wait for it to be in person.
Yeah.
So we had like a soft feeler out there for if people would be okay with this, and we got okay feedback. So that's why we kind of chose to go ahead as well. Unrelated to Online Rush, did the Row chapter make changes to member dues? Also, did more members this year take a leave of absence with operations being online? Do you want to take this one, Jojo?
Yeah, I don't think we collect member dues, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrea, spring or fall and spring, or fall and winter, right? Yes, everybody had paid their dues at that point. For leave of absence, it was only, we allowed seniors to just take kind of like a ghost quarter where they weren't a part of a committee. But in regards to chapter operations, one thing that we did, and we recommend you do this as well with your committees, if like you're going into an online quarter, it just go to each committee lead in like a meeting and be like, how is this affecting your chapter? Because then you can reallocate people to different, so if like fundraising needs like 2 people because they're just going to be talking about sponsorships only, then you don't have to have 8 people on that committee. And it helped kind of readjust everything for chapter operations. But I believe dues didn't get affected because we had already finished those. Did you find alumni engagement increase with less travel and work commitments? Yes, we did. It was fairly, usually we struggle a little bit to get alumni to come back because they'll always have like a work conflict. But since they were all home, it was like very, very accessible for having someone jump on in like an alumni panel or to do a member interview. So we found that to be very successful.
And we're also very intentional about alumni engagement in the sense that we don't try to we try to make sure we diversify who we're asking every year. We don't like tapping on the same people every time just because we don't want, I don't want to hear the same story like every cycle, but also that like, it was just helpful to like re-engage them once a year so that they come back to things. So this time was helpful because some people we hadn't seen in a while were able to come back, which was really nice.
I have an additional point to make, and this was something that I realized after the pledging program, and this is, I think, something that all of you should be cognizant of if you're going to do an online pledging program. was that we felt that the Rush program would allow more introverted individuals to stand on their own merit because they get to just talk to people one-on-one, and that was super helpful for them. One issue that I kind of found out after the pledging program ended was that when it came to the pledge class, the loudest person is the person that's going to lead the discussion. So like one thing I found out was that like while all of them were figuring out who they wanted their bigs to be, there was like 3 individuals that were much more to themselves and they didn't feel comfortable doing that, but the group was kind of pushing for that. So I think that was something that I wish I was a little more cognizant of, was just noticing that some introverted individuals might not speak out as much as their extroverted counterparts. And that might change the dynamic of like the leadership structure within that pledge class. So that's something I would definitely recommend to just be a little bit more cognizant of moving forward. But yeah.
If there are any more questions, like, you know, you're welcome to email us. And this is recorded and will be made available in the slides. Jojo will also be sending out as well with the recruitment guide. Yeah, we know we're a large chapter, and so we know like it may not resonate the same, but we're also happy to kind of help figure or like share other things that we've done that might be more fitting.
Absolutely. But yeah, if you ever need any help adjusting to this, hopefully we can kind of like talk through something to kind of help adjust. Like our disclaimer says, we have about 100 members. We're a fairly large organization at UW's campus, so we're fairly established too. So if you have any questions on it, we're always an email away, or just a Facebook message away. You don't have to, we're all brothers here. Yeah, thank you so much for all being here. Hopefully you don't have to use any of this webinar, but if you do, hopefully this will help guide you through that kind of difficult process. Yeah, you are all good to go.